Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 15 of Making the Shift. Today, we are going to be talking all about how autism is a different neurotype. If you're here live, before I forget, put in the chat where you're from. We always love to see that. So, you will notice that there's a body that should be sitting here next to me. Funny, not so funny story is that this show, I have anxiety every single week because I never know if Chris is going to make it here on time. And you guys may not know this about him, but he has a very long commute. So it takes him like at least, hi, that was faster than I expected. I was going to say an hour and a half to get home, and he FaceTimed me about an hour ago exactly with the video that he showed me was a flat tire. And you had to FaceTime me because if you had called me, I would have been like, no, that's impossible.
Flat as can be.
I thought you would have been like messing with me. I would have thought for sure.
The tires are paper thin. I'm serious. It's like a heavy car with like paper thin tires.
So I never know if he's going to make it on time for these shows. And now school's back in session, so you have to go back to your commute. And then he FaceTimes me and he's in front of his car with a flat tire.
Oh my gosh, so much. But
I cannot believe you're here.
Celebrating in full-bodied, full spirit, full energy. We are good.
That's great. Very happy you made it on time. Everyone's typing in where they're from.
Oh, well, I wanted to say hello. I see we got a San Fernando Valley. That's not far from where we're at. It was a warm day.
Yeah, Sarah said, what a way to start the school year.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, exactly. The nice thing about it is that I'm getting all of these hiccups and all of the difficult things done at the beginning, like today, because once I get through this adversity of life on Tuesdays, I am going to be just fine for tomorrow. It's like my fuel for being tenacious.
There you go.
There we are.
And there's your daily cup of inspiration.
That's right. That's what we do. So we take setbacks and flat tires and we turn them into growth, opportunity, and possibility.
And round fluffy tires.
And debt on my credit card because I have to get a new tire.
Cool.
Let's jump into our topic. What is it, Jesse? What are we talking about?
So I said we're talking today about autism as a different neurotype. And for me, learning this idea was so revolutionary because I'd never heard autism described as a neurotype. And that means a different brain type, a different way that the brain functions. So a neurotypical brain might function one way, an autistic brain might function another way. And I feel like it's just a lot more respectful of a way to see autistic people as a difference in brain type. So I think we think so much about like the medical model of disability. A lot of the things we do are based on that, which is looking only at deficits and what needs to be fixed or what needs to be cured. But the neurodiversity movement is all about pushing the social model, right? So it's all about, well, the issues that autistic people have in the world exist because of these systemic barriers in society. It's like the world wasn't set up for them, which results in them having struggles.
Right, absolutely. Let's go back real quick so we can give kind of like an easy like visualization or image. So neurodiversity, neuro meaning brain, diversity meaning difference, right? So when we think about cultural diversity, different cultures, and we accept that. Neurodiversity is saying, hey, all brains are different. And it looks like we had a comment here. It says different, but not less. And that's exactly right. We have different brain types, right? So that's kind of where we're at. And then shadowing what Jesse was mentioning, moving from a historic model of looking at what was once viewed, and I shouldn't say what was once, still till current day, really heavily viewed as all deficits based versus making the shift over and viewing brains as differences and saying, hey, we need to create an environment and a society that removes barriers and makes everything accessible for everybody, for all different brain types. So that's kind of the important thing.
Yeah. And one thing that really supports this is the idea of the double empathy problem, which I also found so fascinating when I learned about it. And, if you haven't heard of the double empathy problem, it's basically saying that the struggle to understand one person is a certain type of people is not one-sided. So it's saying that the reason why we struggle to understand that other person's perspective is because we have such different experiences in our lives and such different expectations. So autistic people will the problem is not one-sided, meaning it's not just that autistic people have trouble understanding non-autistic people, it goes the other way as well. Non-autistic people having trouble understanding autistic people.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of like the idea of, we tend to sometimes put the demands of an autistic student or child who we're working with by the perspective taking thing without thinking, hey, well, what about the non-autistic people and giving them a perspective of, what a lived experience is of that of an autistic person, different way of communicating, different way of socializing, different way of experiencing sensory input, a variety of things. And so really that's right what Jesse's mentioning. The double empathy problem really is saying, hey, you know what? Two autistic people are going to be able to socialize and communicate easier with each other than an autistic person communicating, socializing with a non-autistic person.
And back to, empathy, what empathy is really being able to understand another person's experience. So that makes complete sense that this person is experiencing the world completely differently. So that makes it inherently difficult for another person to be able to empathize with that situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then what you just said, which is there's so much research, and we'll have to post some links to this research, but there's so much research showing that, autistic people communicate with other autistic people just as strongly as non autistic people communicate with non autistic people. So interaction happens between non-autistic, it's strong. It is just as strong between from autistic person to another autistic person. And there's also so much other research, which I brought because there's so much good stuff, but saying that the when people were in a study and they were rating the quality of the rapport that they were building with the person they were communicating with, that autistic people rated their rapport with other autistic people higher than autistic people with non-autistic, and the opposite went as well, which is non-autistic and non-autistic had a higher rating of rapport than non-autistic to autistic.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like if I were to kind of break down a narrative, it would be like a non-autistic person would say, hey, you know what? One of the things I enjoy doing when I communicate and socialize with others is I like to talk about some things that happened that are random over the weekend. I like to make small talk and engage with multiple people. That's what we would hear from a non-autistic person. An autistic person might say, I really like to connect with people that I share the same interest with. I don't like to do small talk or chit chat for
Chit
hours,
chat.
chit chat for hours on end on the phone. And so that's kind of really tying the differences between social communications and styles.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's like, well, of course, one person has a social communication style of one and the other has another. So it just makes total sense that the communication would be stronger in the separate groups. But the research shows the opposite too, which is that that rapport that autistic people reported that their rapport with non-autistic people was poorer than with other autistic people. And I think what's really interesting too about all this research is kind of what it suggests. And one of the things being that why is this, other than the fact that their social communication style is similar, but other things to think about are that, maybe the behaviors we see in autistic people or autistic traits, like say an autistic person is stimming, or say an autistic person is having a conversation and they're not making a lot of eye contact, that doesn't feel problematic to another autistic person, whereas a non-autistic person may be starting to make judgments about that person.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the kind of the assumption where it comes from when a non-autistic person makes an assumption of, oh, well, that person's hand flapping, so we got to make sure we reduce that, or that person's not making eye contact. I'm used to making eye contact. Let's force that person into socializing and making eye contact. None of that's helpful for anybody.
Yeah, and it really raises the question about how do we judge people socially, because to a person, an autistic person is making completely different judgments about a person than a non-autistic person. Um, and, non-autistic people are more likely to want to have conversations with people, even if they are less socially warm, even if they would consider that person less socially warm. That doesn't stop them from wanting to have a conversation with them in the future. Whereas maybe a person who was non autistic, they would think, oh, that person wasn't very friendly and I don't want to talk to them again. So it really, this goes back to the episode we did, I don't know what number, on autism and friendships. As you were
Yeah.
talking, I was thinking about that, was that it's, they're looking for different things are important to them in a conversation, and maybe like something like shared interests would weigh more a lot heavily on how they rated that conversation than just the person's demeanor.
Right. No, absolutely. I think that's the important thing too, is identifying that we be cautious on the concept of forcing friendships, right? Like, hey, you know what? During this unstructured time, you're going to go out and initiate a conversation with three peers to make a friend. It's like, that's not natural. That's not helpful. All that does is increase social anxiety and much more significant and difficulties on that. But, yeah, really structuring an environment where natural conversations can occur, where friendships can be built based on what we're talking about, interest and specific communication styles and socialization styles and things
Yeah,
of
and
that
I think
nature.
this is like, it almost is opening a can of worms to bigger conversations and things like, why are we so quick to judge people when we meet them? I mean, I'm not saying there's an answer, or like that the world's going to change, but I think that it will be interesting to see as the neurodiversity movement marches forward and it's better known that there are differences in social communication styles, and people are more accepting of autistic communication styles, like what that might look like.
Yeah, I think that ties back into, I mentioned this a couple episodes back, but talking about that deeper discussion of why sometimes we tend to be judgmental off the bat. I think it ties back into the expectation thing too, if you really think about it. Now, I don't want to speak just directly about when we were talking about autistic students. I'm talking about in general in life, autistic or not autistic. The way that we make ourselves unhappy, whether we're talking about autistic students or not, right, is by placing expectations on others. Our boss, like, we place expectations on how they're going to reply, or our significant other, our neighbor, whoever it is. And every day as life moves forward, people change, situations change. And when we place expectations on things, we are automatically setting ourselves up to live an unhappy life. And that's just the reality of it for when we go out for anybody. And then what do we tend to do when we work with artistic students? We end up placing expectations, and then we create goals that say, well, let's work on an expected and unexpected behavior goal. And it's like, oh my gosh, we're just creating a world of unhappiness for ourselves, because why not just let people, you know, live their be them,
Authentic
authentic
selves.
selves, autistic or not, right? How many times have, like, I don't know, I'll use me as an example. In the past, I'll go back in the past where I've had an expectation set on somebody, and then when that person didn't do something, I'm like, ah, what? I can't believe that. And then I would be so mad, right? It's because I set too many expectations or
And
set expectations in the first place.
it makes me think about you. You're neurodivergent. You have ADHD, and I've had to learn your communication style. Like that totally affects your communication style. For example, Chris cannot be on the phone longer than 10 minutes.
Oh, I hate being on the phone.
It's like I could just sense you are not listening to one word I'm saying. Like if it's nearing 10 minutes, I'll look at the phone. I know,
Right. Yeah.
you
She
know?
knows.
But
I
it's
give
like you
some,
have to learn how people communicate best so that you can come
and
up
I
with those
advocate for
solutions.
myself because I know that I don't like to be on the phone. So when I am on the phone, I have over time been able to come up with certain catchphrases for myself. Like, hey, you know what? I got about a minute left, and then I'm pulling into the parking lot. I got to get to this meeting.
You're giving away all
Or
your secrets.
or I'll just say something like, hey, you know what? My phone's running out of juice right now. I'm about a battery, and I got to wrap
No, you
things
don't
up.
have to
Or
because you just go, yeah, yeah. Like you
people
get to know.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to go right back to that expectation though too. Here's something that I've noticed when working with students is that when I remove any expectations and we just have like a situation where natural communication occurs, I notice a lot of great things happening like that I wasn't expecting. So when I remove the expectations and then all of a sudden the student says, "Hey, you know what? Did you what's your favorite version of Five Nights at Freddy's?" And one says, "Oh, part 2 was the best," you know. And then they have this like interaction because I didn't have expectations. And then when something does happen, I'm like, "There's the magic." That's what I'm looking for. I wasn't even expecting that. So a lot of the times you'll see great things happen because of it. So really cool stuff. You
Yeah.
know, I wanted to comment. There was a comment in the chat room here that was mentioning definitely on how do we make the shift from focusing so much on deficits and getting away from that model and focusing more on how can we support the individual and provide an environment that removes barriers. And but how is that model relevant for those who might have more complex communication needs, some of those who might have barriers to accessing certain communication in their community? And the answer to that is we as an entire community and society have to continue our best to make sure we are removing those barriers. And that means allowing access 24/7 in all environments to communication. Like there's no need to put an iPad that is the main source of someone's communication on
In
top
the
of
broom closet.
in the broom closet to collect dust and to collect spiders. That's not helping anybody. But just the other thing I wanted to really note too, and this is really important. This is I printed this out, and it's I'm in the process of thinking about maybe making it a poster with other things on it. But one of them is this idea. Here's how you could really, really, really help your autistic clients and students. Make socializing optional. Why nobody wants to go into an
I feel
environment
like
where they
we
feel
need to,
pressured.
we could make shirts out of that.
Yes, socializing optional, because what we're doing and what we are communicating to others is saying, "Hey, we got no pressures here." And when people like not let's think about the not non-autistic person. When you feel pressured to have to communicate in something you don't want to, what does that do up here? That makes you up in your brain. You go, man, now I've got a little bit of anxiety. Now I don't even want to go to that event because I've got so much social anxiety. So times that by a million for when you put pressures on somebody who lives in a mostly neurotypical world, right? You're really increasing the social anxiety. That can be harmful. So
And
providing an
not
environment.
just optional, but varied. Like what might be fun socially for one person might be totally different. Like maybe that means your students sitting in your classroom at lunch and they're each on their phones playing their own game, but they're together.
Oh, yeah, no, totally. Yeah,
you
that's
know?
absolutely true.
Yeah.
And then communicating however you want. Like, hey, right now, if you don't want to socialize or verbalize, yeah, you can write something down if you want. Shoot me a text, email me, use your AAC device, whatever it might be. Always as an option as well.
And your students, they will text you.
Now, yeah, you know what? I do communicate with some of them.
And after they graduate and they call you, oh, it's the best.
Yeah,
Side note.
saying happy birthday and posting pictures, it's cool. I like that. So, to sum up some of the topic, shifting away from a deficits-based model, which is the medical model, into really accepting how our brains are all different and there's no superior brain or inferior brain, and really creating an environment, speech therapy services, school environment, community, where we're removing barriers so everybody, so it's equitable for, so it's inclusive. I should say inclusive is a much better word. So it's inclusive for everybody. So everybody has access to what they need. I think that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to give a shout out to KJ, who's in the chat, who is one of the autistic contributors to our autism support resources product. So happy you could be here, KJ. And he's chiming in. Go read all of the things that he wrote. It's good stuff.
I love it. Yeah, and he's been providing some great information over
Hmm.
here in the chat room as well.
Yes.
So, yeah, I mean, that's all that I have on my end, and we hope that you got some value, and some things to think about moving forward. Definitely the double empathy problem, is really, something that to explore, and the other stuff that we're talking about with the medical versus social model, is really, some key topics to really, knowing ways that we can support our students
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
clients and kids and everybody. It's what it's all about. So, any last words, Jesse?
It's all you.
You want me to have some last words? Okay, for the last words, some of these topics and things you might know that I work in the school system. So, if any of you work in the school setting, I have an IEP course that is in pre-sale mode right now. You can locate that in the show notes or on my link in the social media handles. And that's all I have for right now.
Yeah. Awesome. So, yeah, I was going to say, we just got to do your master class last week. That was free. It was so much fun and people learned a lot. So, if you feel like this is something you really want to learn more about and you have students on IEPs or you're a parent with a child on IEPs, I could say Chris's stuff is all super, super helpful if you're looking to make your IEPs more neurodiversity affirming.
Yeah, absolutely. I try to keep it fun, upbeat, use a lot of analogies, take big concepts and make them to where we can grasp them so we can change the world. That's what it's all about. That's what the neurodiversity paradigm is about.
All right, everyone. Thanks for coming.
Yes. Until next time. Cheers. Adios.
Bye.
Cool. I didn't know who that was. Kate.